He slammed the car door shut, tossed my suitcase to the ground like trash, and said, "Figure it out." I was still in heels, still in my cocktail dress. The Valentino one I'd bought with my own money, not his. He peeled off thinking he'd made his grand exit. But what he didn't know, the helicopter blades were already spinning, and the pilot, my name was on his flight plan. So when he turned to look back from the overpass, he saw me rise. Not just in altitude, but in life. I married into old money. But I wasn't born into it. And that apparently was my greatest sin, at least in the eyes of his mother, his sisters, and eventually my own husband. When Noah proposed, it felt like a dream. He was handsome, wealthy, well-connected. I was a gallery curator from Charleston, who still answered every call from my student loan provider with a knot in my stomach. But he said he loved my ambition, my independence, my spark. He said that. Until the day he tried to snuff it out. The signs were there from the beginning. I just chose not to see them. At our engagement party, his mother pulled me aside. "You know, dear, we've always expected Noah to marry within our circle." She smiled that practiced smile. But I suppose love conquers all. The word love dripped from her lips like poison. His sister, Catherine, was more direct. "I hope you're not planning to keep working after the wedding. It would be so embarrassing for the family." I laughed it off then. Thought they'd warm up to me eventually. I was 28 and naive enough to believe that proving myself would be enough. The wedding was everything Noah wanted. Nothing I dreamed of. Black tie. 500 guests I'd never met. A string quartet instead of the jazz band I'd suggested. "Trust me," Noah said when I brought up my preferences. "This is how it's done in our family." Our family, like I was already disappearing. The honeymoon was in the Maldives. Beautiful, expensive, isolated. I brought 3 art books to read by the pool. Noah threw them in the trash while I was showering. "We're on vacation," he said. "Can't you just relax for once?" I fished them out later, hid them in my suitcase. That should have been my first clue that I was already learning to hide pieces of myself. When we returned, I threw myself into my work at the gallery. We were planning a major exhibition on forgotten female artists of the early 20th century. It was my passion project. Something that mattered. Noah barely listened when I talked about it over dinner. "That's nice honey," he'd say, scrolling through his phone. "Pass the salt." His friends were worse. At dinner parties, they'd ask what I did, then immediately change the subject when I answered. As if my career was a cute hobby they had to politely acknowledge before moving on to real conversation. The men talked business. The women talked charity events and interior designers. I tried to bridge both worlds, failed at fitting into either. 6 months after the wedding, Noah suggested I quit the gallery. "You don't need to work anymore," he said, as if that settled it. "Focus on the house. On us. The house." His childhood home that his mother had redecorated for us. Every room a museum of old money taste. Nothing I would have chosen. Nothing that felt like me. But I wasn't ready to give up my work. Not yet. "I love what I do," I told him. He looked at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. The fight started small. I'd come home late from the gallery and he'd be waiting with that tight smile. "The Pemberton dinner was tonight," he'd say. "I had to make excuses for you. You didn't tell me about any dinner." "I shouldn't have to tell you everything. You should know these things matter." But how could I know what I was never taught? The worst part wasn't the fighting. It was the way he started talking about me to other people, like I wasn't there. "She's still adjusting." He'd tell his friends when I'd express an opinion they didn't like. "Give her time. Adjusting." Like I was a piece of furniture that didn't quite fit the room. The gallery exhibition opened to incredible reviews. The Times called it a revelatory exploration of artistic voices, long silenced by history. I was proud. Finally, something that was mine. Something I'd built. Noah didn't come to the opening. I had a client dinner, he said. You understand. I understood that his client dinner happened every time I had something important happening in my life. His mother did attend. She walked through once quickly, her lips pressed thin. How interesting, she said to me afterward. Though I do wonder if these artists were forgotten for a reason. That's when I started planning. Not consciously at first. But I began paying attention to things I'd ignored before. Like the fact that Noah never asked about my day unless it related to his schedule. Like the way his family's conversations stopped when I entered a room. Like how he'd started referring to my salary as pin money. The breaking point came at the Hamptons Gala. We were raising funds for arts education, my territory, my expertise, but Noah introduced me to everyone as my wife and nothing else. When someone asked about my background, he'd answer for me. She dabbles in art, he'd say with that indulgent smile. Dabbles. 7 years of education. 5 years at the gallery. A successful exhibition. All reduced to dabbling. When the auction started, I saw it. A 1924 painting by Eleanor Hartwell. I knew her work. Had written about her. This piece was undervalued by at least $50,000. I raised my paddle. Noah grabbed my wrist. What are you doing? It's a steal at this price, I whispered. We don't need more art. But it wasn't about need. It was about recognition. About seeing value where others saw decoration. I kept bidding. Noah's grip tightened. Stop, now! I won the painting for $30,000. A bargain. The table went silent. His mother's face was a mask of controlled fury. Well, she said finally. That was impulsive. I excused myself to the bathroom. When I came back, Noah was gone. I found him outside pacing by the valet stand. You embarrassed me, he said without preamble. In front of everyone. I bought a painting. You spent $30,000 without asking me. With my money. That stopped him, for a moment. Your money. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Your money comes from my trust fund allowance. The allowance he'd insisted on giving me when I quit taking a salary from the gallery to focus on our life together. The allowance that had felt like generosity at the time. Now I saw it for what it was. A leash. Take an Uber, he said. Go home. We'll discuss this later. He didn't wait for a response. Just tossed me the keys to my overnight bag and walked away. Left me standing there like a dismissed employee. But here's what Noah never bothered to learn about me. The thing his family never cared to discover. I wasn't just a gallery curator who'd gotten lucky. 2 years earlier, my great-aunt Evelyn had died. We'd barely known each other. She'd left the family decades ago after some scandal no one talked about. But she left me her vineyard in Napa, 23 acres of struggling vines and a house that needed work. Noah had called it a liability and suggested I sell it immediately. Instead, I kept it, quiet, like a secret. I used my own savings money I'd saved before we married to hire a consultant. To understand what I had, turns out Aunt Evelyn had excellent taste in land. The soil was perfect. The location prime. The vines just needed someone who cared. While Noah thought I was shopping or having lunch with the other wives, I was learning about wine, about business, about building something from nothing. I launched my label 18 months ago. Small batches, exclusive distribution, my maiden name on every bottle. No one in Noah's circle paid attention to wine unless it was French and expensive. They never noticed that Harper Creek wines were showing up in the best restaurants in San Francisco. That we'd won awards. That my business was actually profitable. Noah certainly never noticed. He was too busy deciding what kind of wife I should be to see who I actually was. So when I stood in that parking garage humiliated and furious, I wasn't stranded. I pulled out my phone and called Marcus, my assistant, from the vineyard. "Tell Charles to warm up the bird," I said. "How long until pickup?" Marcus asked, unfazed. He'd arranged these flights before. 15 minutes, the Hamptons Grand rooftop. Copy that. The helicopter was my extravagance. Practical, really. Flying between the city and Napa for business. But tonight it was going to be my exit strategy. I walked into the hotel lobby in my heels and cocktail dress. The concierge knew me. "Mrs. Harper," he said, "your helicopter is en route. Can I offer you anything while you wait?" Mrs. Harper, my business name, the identity Noah had never bothered to learn about. "Just directions to the roof, please." I rode the elevator up, thinking about the last 2 years. All the small compromises that had added up to losing myself. All the times I'd made myself smaller to fit into his world. The helicopter touched down just as my phone started buzzing. Noah, finally realizing I wasn't coming home to wait for his lecture, I answered as I climbed aboard. "Where are you?" he demanded. "Leaving." "Don't be dramatic. Come home, we'll talk." "We're past talking, Noah." Through the window, I saw his BMW pull into the hotel parking lot. He got out, looking around frantically. Sarah, where are you?" I ended the call. Charles, my pilot, handed me a glass of champagne from the cabin's mini-fridge. "Napa, Mrs. Harper." "Napa." As we lifted off, I looked down. Noah was standing in the parking lot, shading his eyes, trying to figure out where the helicopter had come from. He raised his hand like he wanted to flag me down. I raised mine, a wave goodbye. The flight to Napa took 2 hours. 2 hours to think about what came next. I knew Noah would call it a tantrum. His mother would call it a breakdown. His friends would whisper about how I'd finally shown my true colors. Let them. I'd spent 3 years trying to be the wife they wanted. Quiet, grateful, decorative. I was done auditioning for acceptance I was never going to get. When we landed at the vineyard, I stood in my own driveway, breathing air that smelled like earth and growing things. Looking at vines I'd planted. A business I'd built. This was mine, really mine. Not because I'd married it or inherited it or been given it as a consolation prize. Because I'd worked for it. The next morning I called my lawyer. Started divorce proceedings. Noah could keep his trust fund and his mother's approval. I'd keep my name, my business, my self-respect. The tabloids had a field day, of course. Helicopter wife flies the coop. Society divorce takes flight. Noah's mother gave interviews. Said I was unstable and always unsuitable for our family. But funny thing about success, it changes the narrative. When Harper Creek Wines went public 3 months later, when my face was on the cover of Wine Spectator, when Forbes wrote about my overnight success that had actually taken years of quiet work, suddenly I wasn't the crazy wife anymore. I was the entrepreneur who'd built a multi-million-dollar business while her husband thought she was shopping. Noah tried to reconcile. Said he was going through a tough time and hadn't meant to push me away. I told him, "I'm not your therapy. I was your wife." Past tense. He asked for half the vineyard in the divorce. Said he'd supported me while I built it. My lawyer laughed. "With what there's no record of any financial contribution from your client. In fact, Mrs. Harper can prove she funded the entire operation independently." Noah's lawyer looked uncomfortable. "Perhaps we should focus on a more straightforward division of assets." The divorce was finalized 6 months later. I kept everything I'd brought to the marriage, plus everything I'd built during it. Noah kept his trust fund and his family's good opinion. I think I got the better deal. These days I split my time between Napa and a penthouse in San Francisco. I bought it myself. Decorated it myself. Every piece chosen because I loved it, not because it fit someone else's idea of good taste. I still get invitations to Hampton's galas. Now they introduce me as Sarah Harper, the wine entrepreneur. Same person, different story, because that's what I learned in those 2 hours flying over the country at night. Sometimes the life someone thinks they gave you, you actually built yourself. Brick by brick, vine by vine, flight path by flight path. And if they leave you in a parking garage thinking they've put you in your place, make sure you rise so high they'll need binoculars just to spot your heels. The helicopter is just transportation. The real flying happens when you finally stop apologizing for taking up space in your own life.